In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where the line between life and death is measured in seconds, a young woman with steady hands and an unbreakable spirit was about to rewrite the rules of modern warfare. They called her Ghost Angel, a name that would either make grown men laugh or send chills down their spines. Tonight, a decorated SEAL commander was about to discover which reaction was appropriate. What started as mockery in a dusty briefing room would end with a revelation so profound that it would change everything the Special Forces thought they knew about courage, precision, and the true meaning of having someone watch your back from the shadows. This is the story of how one woman's extraordinary skills turned skeptics into believers, and how a single night of impossible odds became legend among the world's most elite warriors. Some stories are born from tragedy, others from triumph. But this story was forged in the crucible where angels fear to tread, and where the impossible becomes reality when the right person holds the trigger. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling military base in Kabul as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell walked through the compound with purposeful strides. Her boots made soft sounds against the packed earth, barely audible over the distant hum of generators and the occasional roar of aircraft taking off from the nearby runway. At 26, Sarah possessed an unusual combination of gentle features and steel-gray eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with calculated precision. She had been stationed in Afghanistan for 8 months now, serving as a sniper support specialist with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Her official record showed exceptional marksmanship scores, advanced tactical training, and a string of successful missions that had earned her respect among her immediate unit. But, to the broader Special Operations community, she remained something of an unknown quantity, a female soldier in a world dominated by testosterone and tradition. The call sign Ghost Angel had come about during her 3rd month in country. It started as a joke among some of the newer recruits who noticed how quietly she moved through their forward operating base and how she seemed to appear and disappear without making a sound. The angel part came from her habit of providing overwatch for ground operations, perched high above the action like a guardian watching over the troops below. What began as gentle teasing had gradually evolved into something approaching respect, at least among those who had worked directly with her. But respect in small circles was different from acceptance in the broader Special Operations community. Sarah understood this dynamic well. She had grown up as the only daughter of a Marine Corps colonel, spending her childhood on various military bases around the world. She had learned early that earning respect meant proving herself over and over again, especially in environments where her presence challenged long-held assumptions about who belonged and who didn't. On this particular morning, Sarah was heading to what promised to be a challenging briefing. Intelligence reports had indicated increased enemy activity in a region about 40 miles northeast of their position. The area was known for its difficult terrain, with steep mountainous ridges and deep valleys that created perfect conditions for ambushes. Local tribal dynamics were complex and often shifted without warning, making it nearly impossible to distinguish between friendly civilians and potential threats. The briefing room was located in one of the more permanent structures on the base, a concrete building that had been constructed by the previous occupying force and now served multiple functions for the American operations. As Sarah approached the entrance, she could hear voices from inside, the kind of confident, overlapping conversation that typically occurred when experienced operators gathered to discuss upcoming missions. She paused outside the door for a moment, checking her watch and ensuring she had all the necessary materials for the briefing. Her sniper rifle case was secured in the armory, but she carried a detailed folder containing topographical maps, weather reports, and intelligence summaries that she had spent the previous evening reviewing. Sarah believed in thorough preparation, understanding that success in her role often depended on factors that others might consider minor details. When she entered the room, the conversation didn't immediately stop, but she noticed several pairs of eyes turn in her direction. The room contained about 15 personnel, mostly men, representing various special operations units that would be participating in the upcoming operation. At the far end of the room, a large map of the target region was displayed on the wall, marked with various colored pins indicating known enemy positions, friendly checkpoints, and potential extraction points. The mission commander for this operation was Commander James Harrison, a 15-year veteran of naval special warfare and leader of a SEAL Team 6 unit that had recently arrived in theater. Harrison had built his reputation through successful operations in Iraq and previous deployments to Afghanistan. He was known for his tactical expertise, aggressive leadership style, and sometimes abrasive personality. At 38, he had achieved a level of respect within the special operations community that few ever reached. Harrison stood near the map, discussing potential approach routes with several of his team members. He was a physically imposing man, standing well over 6 feet tall with the kind of muscular build that came from years of intensive training and combat operations. His voice carried easily across the room, and, when he spoke, others tended to listen. Sarah had heard stories about his previous missions, including several that had become legendary within certain circles. As personnel continued to filter into the room, Sarah found a seat toward the back and began reviewing her notes. She had studied the target area extensively and had identified several potential sniper positions that could provide effective overwatch for the planned operation. The mission called for a complex insertion into hostile territory, followed by surveillance and potential direct action against a high-value target believed to be operating from a compound in the mountain region. The tactical challenges were significant. The target compound was situated on elevated terrain that provided excellent defensive advantages. Approach routes were limited and would require teams to move through areas where they could be easily observed and engaged by enemy forces. Weather conditions in the region were unpredictable, with sudden changes that could affect visibility and helicopter operations. Most importantly, the enemy forces in the area were known to be well-trained and heavily armed. When the formal briefing began, Harrison moved to the center of the room and began outlining the mission parameters. His presentation was thorough and professional, covering everything from insertion methods to extraction procedures. He discussed the intelligence picture, the threat assessment, and the specific objectives that needed to be accomplished. As he spoke, Sarah took careful notes, particularly regarding timing and coordination requirements that would affect her role in the operation. About halfway through the briefing, Harrison began discussing personnel assignments. He went through each team systematically, explaining roles and responsibilities. When he reached the sniper support element, he paused and looked around the room until his eyes settled on Sarah. "Our overwatch will be provided by Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, his tone neutral but carrying an undertone that suggested some level of skepticism. "Call sign Ghost Angel." The reaction in the room was immediate and telling. Several of the SEAL team members exchanged glances, and Sarah caught at least 2 barely suppressed smiles. The call sign that had earned respect within her own unit apparently struck some of these operators as amusing rather than appropriate. Harrison himself seemed to pause for a moment after saying the name, as if considering whether to make some kind of comment. "Ghost Angel," repeated one of Harrison's team leaders, Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, unable to completely hide his amusement. "That's an interesting call sign for a sniper." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her stomach that came with these moments. She had experienced similar reactions before, though usually not in such a high-stakes environment. The combination of her gender, her relatively junior rank, and what some apparently considered a soft call sign created an impression that she was accustomed to having to overcome through performance rather than words. Harrison seemed to sense the shift in the room's atmosphere. "Lieutenant Mitchell has been providing sniper support for Ranger operations in this area for several months," he said, his tone remaining professional. "Her role will be to provide overwatch during our insertion and maintain surveillance on potential escape routes from the target compound." The explanation was accurate but delivered in a way that seemed to minimize the importance of the sniper role. Sarah understood that this was partly tactical, emphasizing the supporting rather than integral nature of overwatch, but it also reflected a certain attitude about her capabilities and importance to the mission's success. As Harrison continued with the briefing, Sarah focused on the tactical details that would affect her performance. The target compound was located on a ridgeline that offered limited sniper positions. The best available location appeared to be a rocky outcropping about 800 meters from the primary building, which would provide adequate concealment but would require a difficult approach through exposed terrain. Alternative positions were either too distant for effective engagement or lacked sufficient concealment for a prolonged operation. The insertion plan called for the main assault team to approach the compound from the east, using a ravine system that would provide some protection from observation. Sarah's position would be established several hours before the main operation began, allowing her to observe enemy activity patterns and provide early warning of any complications. The extraction plan included multiple contingencies, but all of them relied heavily on maintaining tactical surprise and avoiding extended engagement with superior enemy forces. When the formal briefing concluded, the room broke into smaller groups as team leaders discussed specific coordination requirements with their personnel. Sarah approached Harrison to discuss the sniper support plan in more detail, knowing that clear communication would be essential for mission success. "Commander Harrison," she said, her voice steady and professional. "I'd like to review the overwatch positions and discuss coordination procedures for the sniper element." Harrison looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant, I appreciate your thoroughness, but the sniper role for this operation is relatively straightforward. Establish position, observe, and report. We're not expecting you to engage unless specifically directed." The response was polite but dismissive, reflecting an assumption that Sarah's role would be limited to passive observation rather than active support. This kind of attitude was not uncommon, but it could create dangerous gaps in tactical coordination if not addressed properly. "Sir, I understand the observation requirement," Sarah replied. "But, given the terrain and the potential for enemy forces to use the northern escape routes, there may be opportunities for the sniper element to provide more active support. I've identified several engagement zones where well-timed shots could significantly impact the tactical situation." Harrison studied the map for a moment, then looked back at Sarah. "Lieutenant, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this operation will be handled by experienced special operations personnel. Your job is to watch and report. Leave the shooting to the professionals." The comment hung in the air for several seconds. Around the room, conversations continued, but Sarah noticed that several personnel had overheard Harrison's response. The implication was clear: despite her training, her experience, and her proven track record, she was not considered a professional in the same sense as the male special operations soldiers. Sarah felt a familiar surge of frustration, but she kept her expression neutral. "Understood, sir. I'll focus on observation and communication." "Good," Harrison said, already turning his attention back to the map. "We'll want regular reports on enemy movement and any changes in the tactical situation. Keep the radio chatter to a minimum unless you see something that directly affects our operation." As the meeting continued, Sarah found herself somewhat isolated from the tactical discussions that were taking place among the various team leaders. The assumption seemed to be that her role was sufficiently simple that detailed coordination was unnecessary. While she understood the military hierarchy and the importance of following orders, she also recognized that this attitude could lead to missed opportunities and potentially dangerous oversights. The rest of the day was spent in mission preparation activities. Sarah checked and rechecked her equipment, studied the terrain maps until she could visualize the target area in detail, and reviewed intelligence reports about enemy activity patterns. She also spent time at the base's rifle range, ensuring that her weapon systems were properly zeroed and that her shooting skills remained sharp. That evening, as she cleaned her rifle in the quiet of her quarters, Sarah reflected on the challenges that lay ahead. The mission itself would be difficult enough, given the terrain and the enemy situation. But she also faced the additional challenge of proving herself to a group of operators who clearly had doubts about her capabilities. She had been in similar situations before and had learned that the only effective response was flawless performance. As she worked, Sarah thought about her father's advice from years earlier when she had first expressed interest in military service. "The uniform doesn't automatically earn respect," he had told her. "Respect comes from what you do while wearing it. Some people will doubt you because of who you are instead of what you can do. Your job is to prove them wrong through your actions, not your words." Tomorrow would bring another opportunity to do exactly that. In the mountains of Afghanistan, with lives potentially hanging in the balance, Sarah would have the chance to demonstrate that Ghost Angel was more than just an amusing call sign. It was a name that reflected skills, dedication, and a level of professional competence that could make the difference between mission success and tragedy. The stakes were high, but Sarah had never backed down from a challenge. Tomorrow's mission would be no different. As she finished cleaning her rifle and began preparing for what would likely be very little sleep, she focused on the job ahead rather than the skepticism she had encountered. In a few hours, actions would speak louder than words, and Sarah intended to make sure her actions sent a very clear message about what Ghost Angel could accomplish when the situation demanded excellence. The helicopter's rotors cut through the pre-dawn darkness as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her position in the cabin, checking her equipment one final time before insertion. The aircraft flew low and fast through the mountain valleys, using the terrain to mask its approach from enemy radar and observation posts. Inside the cabin, the noise made conversation nearly impossible, but the tension among the crew was palpable even without words. Sarah's insertion would happen first, dropped at a landing zone approximately 2 miles from her intended sniper position. She would then have to move through difficult terrain and darkness to reach her overwatch location and establish her position before sunrise. The timing was critical. She needed to be in place and ready to provide surveillance before the main assault team began their approach to the target compound. Her equipment had been carefully selected for the mission requirements. In addition to her primary sniper rifle, a precision weapon system capable of accurate engagement at distances exceeding 1,000 meters, she carried a backup rifle, extensive ammunition supplies, communication equipment, and survival gear sufficient for several days if extraction became complicated. The total weight approached 90 pounds, a significant load that would make the approach march physically demanding. As the helicopter approached the insertion point, Sarah reviewed the route she would take to reach her position. The path led through rocky terrain that would provide good concealment but would also slow her movement significantly. She would need to navigate by compass and terrain features, avoiding established trails that might be monitored by enemy forces. The final approach to her sniper position would require climbing a steep rock face, a maneuver that would be challenging even without the heavy equipment load. The aircraft commanders signaled that they were approaching the landing zone. Sarah moved toward the cabin door and prepared for a fast rope insertion. This technique would allow the helicopter to hover briefly while she descended on a thick rope, minimizing the aircraft's exposure to potential enemy fire. She had performed this type of insertion many times during training, but doing it in hostile territory with full combat equipment added layers of complexity and risk. The helicopter slowed and began its hover as Sarah attached her equipment to the rope system. Below her, the landing zone appeared as a small clearing surrounded by rocky outcroppings and scattered vegetation. Intelligence reports had indicated the area was unoccupied by enemy forces, but, in Afghanistan, intelligence could change rapidly and without warning. Sarah began her descent, controlling her speed carefully to avoid injury while moving quickly enough to minimize the helicopter's exposure time. The rope burned slightly against her gloves as she managed the descent, and the rotor wash from above created a whirlwind of dust and debris that made seeing the ground difficult. When her boots touched down, she immediately disconnected from the rope and moved away from the landing zone, seeking cover among the nearby rocks. The helicopter departed as quickly as it had arrived, its sound fading rapidly as it flew back toward the base. Within minutes, Sarah was alone in the Afghan mountains, surrounded by the profound silence that follows the departure of aircraft in remote areas. She took a moment to orient herself, checking her compass and identifying terrain features that would guide her movement toward the target area. The march to her sniper position took nearly 3 hours. Moving through the rocky terrain with heavy equipment proved as challenging as she had anticipated. The route required constant attention to foot placement and balance, particularly during the steeper sections where a fall could result in serious injury or equipment damage. Sarah had to stop periodically to rest and check her navigation, ensuring she remained on course despite the difficult conditions. As she moved through the darkness, Sarah's mind focused on the tactical situation ahead. Intelligence reports indicated that the target compound housed between 8 and 12 enemy personnel, including the high-value individual that the mission was designed to capture or eliminate. The compound's location on elevated terrain provided excellent defensive advantages, with clear observation of all approach routes and multiple prepared fighting positions. The main assault team would begin their movement toward the target compound approximately 2 hours after Sarah reached her position. Their approach would take them through a ravine system that provided some concealment but also created potential choke points where they could be trapped if enemy forces detected their movement. Sarah's overwatch position would allow her to observe these approach routes and provide early warning of any complications. When Sarah finally reached the base of the rocky outcropping that would serve as her sniper position, she paused to assess the climb ahead. The rock face rose nearly 40 feet, with a series of ledges and cracks that would provide hand and footholds for the ascent. However, climbing with her equipment load would require careful planning and execution. A fall from this height could be fatal, and any noise during the climb might alert enemy forces to her presence. Sarah secured her heavier equipment with climbing rope, planning to haul it up after she reached the top. She then began the climb, moving slowly and deliberately from one hold to the next. The rock was solid but rough, providing good grip for her hands and boots. About halfway up, she encountered a more difficult section where the holds were smaller and required more upper body strength to navigate. As she climbed, Sarah could see the first hints of dawn beginning to lighten the eastern sky. Time was becoming a factor. She needed to reach her position and be prepared to provide overwatch before full daylight revealed her location to potential enemy observers. The physical demands of the climb, combined with the weight of her equipment and the stress of the tactical situation, pushed her endurance to its limits. When she finally reached the top of the outcropping, Sarah found herself on a narrow ledge that provided an excellent view of the target compound while offering good concealment from enemy observation. The position was even better than it had appeared on the maps, with natural rock formations that would hide her rifle and equipment while allowing clear fields of fire across multiple engagement zones. Sarah quickly established her sniper position, setting up her rifle with its associated optics and range-finding equipment. She then unpacked her observation tools, including high-powered binoculars and a spotting scope that would allow detailed surveillance of enemy activity around the compound. Communication equipment was tested to ensure reliable contact with the assault team and the Tactical Operations Center. As daylight increased, Sarah began systematic observation of the target area. The compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with defensive walls that limited visibility into the interior areas. She could see prepared fighting positions at various points around the perimeter, including what appeared to be heavy weapons emplacements that could seriously threaten any approaching force. Through her spotting scope, Sarah began to catalog enemy activity patterns. She observed guards moving between positions on a schedule that seemed to follow a regular rotation. There were civilians in the area, including children playing in a nearby village that complicated targeting decisions. Vehicle traffic was minimal but included several pickup trucks that could potentially be used for rapid enemy reinforcement or escape. About an hour after Sarah had established her position, her radio crackled with the first communication from the assault team. Commander Harrison's voice was calm and professional as he reported that his team had begun their approach march toward the compound. The main assault was scheduled to begin in approximately 90 minutes, timing that would allow them to reach their attack positions while maintaining tactical surprise. Sarah acknowledged the communication and provided her first intelligence report. She described the enemy activity she had observed, the defensive preparations around the compound, and the civilian presence in the surrounding area. Her observations painted a picture of a well-prepared enemy force that was clearly aware of the potential for attack and had taken appropriate defensive measures. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed changes in the enemy activity patterns that suggested increased alertness. Guards were remaining at their positions for longer periods, and there was more communication activity visible between the different fighting positions. Whether this represented routine security measures or indicated awareness of the approaching assault team was unclear. The assault team continued their approach, moving through the ravine system according to the planned route. Sarah maintained surveillance of the compound while also watching the terrain between her position and the assault team's location. Her elevated position allowed her to see areas that the ground team could not observe, making her an essential early warning system for potential threats. About 30 minutes before the scheduled assault time, Sarah observed activity that immediately raised her concern level. A vehicle had departed from the compound, heading in the direction of the ravine system where the assault team was approaching. The vehicle appeared to be conducting some form of reconnaissance or patrol activity, potentially putting it in position to detect the approaching assault force. Sarah immediately contacted Commander Harrison to report the vehicle movement. Her radio call was acknowledged, but the response suggested that the assault team leader was not particularly concerned about the development. Harrison indicated that his team was prepared to deal with vehicle patrols and that the mission would proceed as planned. 10 minutes later, Sarah's radio again crackled to life, but this time the tone was different. The assault team had encountered the patrol vehicle, and the situation had quickly escalated into a firefight. The element of tactical surprise had been lost, and the enemy forces at the compound were now fully alert and prepared for attack. Harrison's voice carried obvious stress as he reported the contact. His team had successfully eliminated the patrol, but gunfire had been heard at the compound, and the enemy was now moving to reinforce their defensive positions. The tactical situation had changed dramatically from what had been planned as a surprise assault. Sarah watched through her scope as activity around the compound increased rapidly. Guards were moving to prepared fighting positions, and she could see additional personnel emerging from the buildings. What had been a manageable enemy force was now becoming a significantly larger threat as reinforcements appeared to be arriving from locations that had not been identified during mission planning. The assault team was now in a difficult position. They were committed to the attack but faced an alert enemy force that was prepared for their arrival. The ravine system that had provided concealment during their approach was now becoming a potential trap, as enemy forces moved to positions where they could engage the assault team from elevated terrain. Commander Harrison made the tactical decision to continue with the assault rather than attempt extraction. His team's position in the ravine made them vulnerable to enemy fire from the compound, and their best chance for survival was to close with the enemy and take control of the defensive positions. The mission objective had shifted from capture or elimination of the high-value target to survival and elimination of the immediate threat. Sarah found herself in a position that had not been anticipated in the mission planning. Instead of providing passive observation and reporting, she was now the assault team's primary advantage in what had become a desperate tactical situation. Her elevated position and precision weapons gave her the ability to engage enemy forces that the ground team could not effectively target. Without waiting for specific authorization, Sarah began engaging enemy personnel who were moving to positions where they could threaten the assault team. Her first shot eliminated a machine gunner who was setting up to fire into the ravine where Harrison's team was pinned down. The shot was taken at a distance of nearly 800 meters, requiring careful calculation of wind conditions and bullet drop. The effect of Sarah's intervention was immediate and dramatic. The enemy forces at the compound began to realize they were under fire from an unknown location, causing confusion and disruption in their defensive preparations. Several enemy personnel abandoned their positions to seek cover, reducing the volume of fire directed at the assault team. Sarah continued engaging targets methodically, focusing on enemy personnel who posed the greatest threat to the assault team's survival. Each shot was carefully planned and executed, taking into account the complex ballistics required for precision shooting at extended range. Her training and experience allowed her to maintain accuracy even under the stress of combat conditions. Commander Harrison's voice came over the radio again, this time with obvious amazement in his tone. "Ghost Angel, this is actual. Outstanding shooting. Continue engaging enemy positions on the north side of the compound." For the first time since the mission had begun, Sarah heard genuine respect in Harrison's communication. The skepticism and dismissiveness from the previous day's briefing had been replaced by professional appreciation for capabilities that were proving essential to mission success. The tactical situation continued to evolve rapidly as Sarah's precision fire allowed the assault team to advance from the ravine toward the compound. Her ability to eliminate specific threats at critical moments gave Harrison's team the advantage they needed to close with the enemy and begin taking control of the defensive positions. As the morning sun climbed higher in the Afghan sky, what had begun as a routine mission had become a test of skills, courage, and determination that would be remembered long after the immediate tactical objectives had been accomplished. The battle for the compound intensified as Commander Harrison's assault team fought their way out of the ravine system and began their advance toward the main defensive positions. Sarah's precision fire had disrupted the enemy's initial response, but the defenders were now adapting to the threat from her elevated position. They began using smoke grenades and moving in patterns designed to avoid exposure to her line of sight. Through her spotting scope, Sarah could see the tactical complexity developing around the compound. The enemy forces were better trained and more disciplined than intelligence reports had suggested. They were using coordinated fire and movement techniques, establishing overlapping fields of fire, and demonstrating the kind of tactical sophistication typically associated with professional military units rather than irregularly trained insurgents. Harrison's team had managed to establish a foothold near the outer defensive wall, but their progress toward the main buildings was being slowed by determined resistance. Sarah could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions around the compound as the defenders maintained steady volumes of fire. The SEAL team was taking cover behind whatever terrain features they could find, but their position remained precarious. Sarah's radio crackled with Harrison's voice, now strained with the stress of prolonged combat. "Ghost Angel, we need suppression fire on the building directly north of our position. Multiple shooters, second-floor windows." Sarah adjusted her scope and identified the building Harrison had referenced. She could see movement in several windows, with enemy personnel using the elevation to fire down at the assault team's positions. The range was approximately 700 meters, well within her capabilities, but the targets were partially concealed and would require precise shooting to neutralize effectively. Her first shot shattered a window and eliminated one of the shooters, causing the others to immediately seek cover deeper within the building. Sarah methodically engaged each window position, forcing the enemy personnel to abandon their advantageous firing positions. The suppression effect was immediate. The volume of fire directed at the assault team decreased significantly, allowing them to resume their advance. As Harrison's team moved closer to the compound buildings, the tactical situation became increasingly complex. Enemy reinforcements were arriving from directions that had not been anticipated in the mission planning. Sarah observed vehicles approaching from the west, carrying additional fighters who quickly dismounted and moved to join the defensive effort. The arrival of reinforcements changed the tactical balance significantly. What had begun as an assault against a fixed defensive position was becoming a larger engagement with potentially superior enemy numbers. Harrison's team was now facing the possibility of being surrounded and overwhelmed by forces approaching from multiple directions. Sarah immediately reported the reinforcement activity to Harrison while simultaneously engaging the newly arrived enemy personnel. Her elevated position allowed her to observe and target the reinforcements while they were still moving into position, preventing them from establishing effective firing positions against the assault team. The engagement became a race against time. Harrison's team needed to complete their assault and secure the compound before additional enemy forces could arrive and completely surround their position. Sarah's continued precision fire was essential to maintaining the tactical advantage that would allow the assault team to accomplish their mission and extract successfully. Through her scope, Sarah observed Harrison personally leading his team in a direct assault against the main compound building. The SEAL commander was demonstrating the kind of aggressive leadership that had earned him his reputation within the special operations community. He moved from position to position under enemy fire, coordinating his team's advance and maintaining the momentum necessary for success. The assault team's advance brought them into close contact with the enemy defenders, and the engagement shifted from long-range firing to close-quarters combat. Sarah could see her teammates moving through the compound, clearing buildings and eliminating resistance with the kind of precision and violence that characterized elite special operations forces. However, the close-quarters nature of the fighting also limited Sarah's ability to provide fire support without risking friendly casualties. She shifted her focus to observing the surrounding area and engaging any enemy forces that might threaten the assault team from external positions. Her role evolved from direct fire support to perimeter security and early warning. As Harrison's team fought through the compound, Sarah noticed activity in a building that had not been part of the original target assessment. Through her scope, she observed what appeared to be a high-value individual attempting to escape through a concealed exit on the north side of the compound. The individual was moving with several heavily armed escorts toward a vehicle that had been positioned for rapid departure. Sarah immediately contacted Harrison to report the escape attempt, but the assault team leader was heavily engaged in close combat and unable to respond to the threat. The tactical situation required immediate action to prevent the loss of what might be the primary mission objective, a high-value target that the entire operation had been designed to capture or eliminate. The escape route took the target group through an area that was visible from Sarah's position but would be difficult for the assault team to reach quickly. The range was extreme for a precision shot, nearly 1,000 meters, and the targets were moving rapidly toward their vehicle. Sarah had perhaps 30 seconds to make a decision that could determine the success or failure of the entire mission. The shot required calculation of multiple factors including wind speed and direction, target movement, bullet drop over the extended range, and the need to select the most critical target from among the moving group. Sarah's training had prepared her for exactly this type of engagement, but the pressure of the tactical situation added complexity that could not be replicated in any training environment. Sarah steadied her rifle and controlled her breathing as she calculated the shot. The high-value target was moving toward the vehicle in a pattern that would provide one clear opportunity for engagement before he reached cover. The wind conditions were manageable but required careful compensation for the extended range. Most challenging was the need to time the shot to intersect with the target's movement pattern. When Sarah squeezed the trigger, the shot felt perfect. The rifle's recoil was absorbed smoothly, and, through her scope, she watched the bullet's trajectory toward the distant target. At extreme range, there was a brief delay between the trigger pull and the visible impact, time during which the success or failure of the shot remained unknown. The bullet struck the high-value target precisely as he reached for the vehicle's door handle. The impact was immediately fatal, and the target's escorts paused momentarily in confusion before beginning to return fire in Sarah's general direction. However, their response was ineffective due to the extreme range and their inability to precisely locate her position. Sarah's successful elimination of the high-value target fundamentally changed the tactical situation. The primary mission objective had been accomplished, which meant that Harrison's team could now focus on extraction rather than continuing to fight through the compound. The psychological effect on the remaining enemy forces was also significant. The loss of their leader caused visible disruption in their coordination and resistance. Harrison's voice came over the radio with obvious excitement. "Ghost Angel, outstanding shot. Target is down. Initiating extraction procedures." The successful elimination of the high-value target marked a turning point in the engagement, but the tactical challenges were far from over. Harrison's team still needed to extract from the compound and reach their extraction point while potentially facing continued resistance from the remaining enemy forces. Additional reinforcements were still arriving in the area, and the longer the engagement continued, the more difficult extraction would become. Sarah maintained her overwatch position as Harrison's team began their withdrawal from the compound. The extraction plan called for them to move through a different route than their approach, using terrain features that would provide concealment from enemy observation. However, the prolonged engagement had altered the tactical situation in ways that made the original extraction plan potentially problematic. Through her scope, Sarah observed enemy forces moving to positions where they could interdict the assault team's planned withdrawal route. The remaining defenders were clearly attempting to prevent the team's escape, understanding that allowing them to withdraw successfully would represent a complete tactical defeat for their forces. Sarah began engaging these interdiction attempts, using precision fire to prevent enemy forces from establishing positions along the extraction route. Her continued fire support was essential to maintaining the corridor that would allow Harrison's team to reach their extraction point safely. The withdrawal became a fighting retreat, with Harrison's team moving by bounds while Sarah provided overwatch and eliminated threats as they developed. The coordination between the sniper position and the ground team had evolved into the kind of seamless tactical cooperation that represented the highest level of special operations effectiveness. As Harrison's team moved through the extraction route, Sarah began planning her own withdrawal from the sniper position. She would need to climb down from the rocky outcropping and move to an alternate extraction point where she could be picked up by helicopter. The timing would be critical. She needed to maintain fire support for as long as possible while still allowing sufficient time for her own extraction. The enemy forces made several attempts to assault Sarah's position directly, apparently recognizing that eliminating the sniper would significantly improve their tactical situation. However, her elevated position and the difficulty of the approach route made these attempts unsuccessful. Sarah was able to observe the approaching threats and engage them before they could reach effective range. As the morning progressed toward noon, the tactical situation began to stabilize in favor of the American forces. Harrison's team had successfully withdrawn from the immediate area around the compound and was approaching their extraction point. The high-value target had been eliminated, and the enemy forces had suffered significant casualties that reduced their ability to continue effective resistance. Sarah received the signal to begin her own extraction as Harrison's team reached their pickup point. She quickly broke down her sniper position, packing her equipment for the movement to her alternate extraction site. The climb down from the rocky outcropping would be challenging with the heavy equipment load, but the tactical situation no longer required her to maintain the elevated position. As she began her descent, Sarah reflected on the events of the morning. What had begun as a mission where her role was minimized and her capabilities questioned had evolved into a situation where her skills had proved essential to mission success. The precision fire support she had provided had made the difference between success and potential disaster for Harrison's assault team. The extraction helicopter arrived at Sarah's pickup point as she reached the designated landing zone. The aircraft was the same one that had inserted her before dawn, and seeing it approach felt like completing a circle that had begun in darkness and uncertainty. As she climbed aboard, Sarah carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that she had performed at the highest level when the situation demanded excellence. During the flight back to base, Sarah reviewed the events of the mission and began to process the significance of what had occurred. The operation had been successful beyond the original objectives. Not only had the high-value target been eliminated, but the entire enemy force in the area had been significantly degraded. Most importantly, all American personnel had been extracted safely despite the tactical complications that had developed during the engagement. The helicopter touched down at the base as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landing pad. Sarah climbed out of the aircraft, her equipment heavy on her shoulders and her body feeling the accumulated fatigue of the morning's intense operations. Around her, the familiar sounds and activities of the military base seemed almost surreal after the life and death intensity of the mountain engagement. As she walked across the tarmac toward the equipment storage area, Sarah noticed that word of the mission's success had already begun to spread throughout the base. Personnel who normally paid little attention to her presence now watched with obvious interest as she passed. The transformation in their attention was subtle but unmistakable. She was no longer just another soldier returning from a routine operation. The debriefing was scheduled to begin in 2 hours, which gave Sarah time to secure her equipment, clean her weapons, and prepare her after-action report. These administrative tasks provided a welcome routine after the stress of combat operations, allowing her mind to begin processing the events of the morning in a more systematic way. In the armory, as Sarah methodically cleaned her sniper rifle, she reflected on the shots she had taken during the engagement. Each one had been carefully planned and executed under pressure, but the final shot, the elimination of the high-value target at nearly 1,000 meters, represented the kind of precision shooting that few snipers ever had the opportunity to demonstrate under combat conditions. The technical aspects of that shot would be analyzed and discussed for months to come. The range, the moving target, the wind conditions, and the pressure of the tactical situation combined to create one of the most challenging shooting scenarios possible. Success had required not just technical skill, but also the mental discipline to perform flawlessly when failure could have meant the loss of the primary mission objective. As she worked, other personnel from the base began approaching to ask about the mission. Word had spread that the operation had been dramatically successful and that the sniper support had played a crucial role in that success. Sarah answered their questions professionally but briefly, understanding that the full details would be covered in formal debriefing sessions. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, the SEAL team leader who had smiled at her call sign during the previous day's briefing, approached as Sarah was completing her equipment maintenance. His demeanor was completely different from the skeptical amusement he had displayed earlier. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, his tone carrying genuine respect. "I wanted to personally thank you for what you did out there today. Your shooting saved lives and made the mission possible." Sarah looked up from her rifle, surprised by the directness of his approach. "Thank you, Sergeant Torres. I was just doing my job." "No ma'am," Torres replied, shaking his head. "What you did today went well beyond just doing your job. That final shot on the HVT, I've been in this business for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Commander Harrison wanted me to tell you that he'll be putting you in for a commendation." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of other team members who had participated in the morning's operation. Each of them took time to personally acknowledge Sarah's contribution to the mission's success. The contrast with their attitudes from the previous day was striking and complete. As the group dispersed to prepare for the formal debriefing, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed in how she was perceived within the special operations community. The skepticism and dismissiveness that had characterized their initial reactions to her participation had been replaced by professional respect based on demonstrated capability under the most demanding circumstances. The formal debriefing took place in the same room where the mission had been planned the previous day. However, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of sitting in the back of the room as she had during the initial briefing, Sarah found herself at the front, with Commander Harrison directing most of the tactical discussion toward her observations and actions during the engagement. Harrison began the debriefing by outlining the overall success of the mission. The high-value target had been eliminated, significant enemy forces had been neutralized, and all American personnel had been extracted without casualties. He then turned to Sarah to provide her perspective on the sniper support operations. Lieutenant Mitchell's overwatch proved to be the decisive factor in mission success, Harrison stated to the assembled group. Her precision fire support enabled the assault team to advance through determined enemy resistance, and her elimination of the HVT at extreme range accomplished the primary mission objective. Sarah provided a detailed account of her observations and actions during the operation. She described the enemy defensive preparations, the arrival of reinforcements, and the tactical decisions she had made regarding target engagement priorities. Her presentation was thorough and professional, focusing on the tactical lessons learned rather than personal achievements. During the question and answer portion of the debriefing, it became clear that Sarah's performance had impressed even experienced special operations personnel who had initially been skeptical of her capabilities. The questions focused on technical aspects of her shooting, her tactical decision-making process, and her recommendations for similar operations in the future. One of the most significant questions came from Torres, who asked about Sarah's decision to engage the escaping high-value target without explicit authorization. This highlighted one of the most critical moments of the operation, the point where Sarah had to make an independent tactical decision that affected the entire mission outcome. The tactical situation required immediate action, Sarah explained. Commander Harrison and his team were heavily engaged and couldn't respond to the escape attempt. The shot was within my capabilities, and the target was the primary mission objective. I made the decision to engage based on my assessment of the tactical priorities. Harrison nodded approvingly. Lieutenant Mitchell demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical initiative that we expect from special operations personnel. Her decision-making under pressure exemplified the highest standards of military professionalism. The debriefing continued for over an hour, with detailed discussion of every aspect of the operation. Sarah's role was examined from multiple perspectives, and it became clear that her contribution had been far more significant than anyone had anticipated during the mission planning phase. As the formal debriefing concluded, Harrison approached Sarah privately. "Lieutenant, I owe you an apology for my attitude yesterday. I made assumptions based on limited information and nearly missed the opportunity to fully utilize your capabilities." Sarah appreciated the honesty but responded diplomatically. "Sir, skepticism is natural when working with new personnel. What matters is mission success and team performance." "You're right about mission success," Harrison replied, "but I want you to know that your performance today has earned you a permanent place on any operation I command. The call sign Ghost Angel isn't something to laugh at, it's something to be respected." The conversation marked a complete transformation in Harrison's perception of Sarah's capabilities and role within the special operations community. The commander who had dismissively limited her role to passive observation now viewed her as an integral member of the tactical team. Over the following days, word of Sarah's performance spread throughout the broader special operations network in Afghanistan. The story of the 1,000-meter shot that eliminated the high-value target became legendary within sniper communities, and requests began arriving for her participation in other high-priority operations. The transformation in attitudes was evident in every aspect of base life. Personnel who had previously viewed her with curiosity or mild skepticism now approached her with genuine professional respect. Her inclusion in tactical planning sessions became automatic rather than grudging, and her opinions on operational matters were sought and valued. Sarah found herself invited to participate in advanced training exercises with other special operations units, opportunities that had not been available to her before the successful mission. These invitations represented recognition that she had earned her place among the elite operators who formed the core of Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan. The psychological impact of the mission's success extended beyond immediate recognition. Sarah realized that she had definitively proven to herself that she could perform at the highest level under the most demanding circumstances. The doubts and uncertainties that had occasionally surfaced during her early months in theater had been replaced by quiet confidence based on demonstrated capability. However, Sarah also understood that success brought increased expectations and responsibilities. Future missions would be planned with the assumption that she could deliver the same level of performance she had demonstrated during the compound assault. The pressure to maintain that standard would be constant and demanding. As she prepared for sleep that night, Sarah reflected on the events that had transformed her from a peripheral participant in special operations to a respected member of the elite community. The journey from skepticism to respect had been accomplished through actions rather than words, performance rather than promises. The base was quiet in the late evening hours, with only essential personnel maintaining their duties. Sarah's quarters provided a peaceful environment for contemplating the day's events and their broader significance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight she could rest with the satisfaction of knowing that she had proven herself when it mattered most. The mission had validated not just her individual capabilities, but also the broader principle that excellence in military service was determined by performance rather than demographics. Sarah had demonstrated that dedication, training, and skill were the true measures of value in special operations, regardless of any other factors that might create initial skepticism. As she drifted toward sleep, Sarah thought about her father's advice about earning respect through actions rather than words. The morning's mission had provided the ultimate test of that philosophy, and the results had exceeded even her own expectations. Ghost Angel was no longer just a call sign, it had become a symbol of precision, reliability, and excellence under pressure. The reputation she had earned would follow her throughout her military career, opening doors to opportunities and responsibilities that might otherwise have been unavailable. But, more importantly, she had proven to herself that she belonged among the best, that her dedication and training could stand up to the ultimate test of combat operations in one of the world's most challenging environments. 3 weeks after the compound mission, Sarah found herself standing in the same briefing room where Commander Harrison had first dismissed her capabilities. This time, however, she was there as a requested participant in a joint operation involving multiple special operations units. The transformation in her status within the community was complete and undeniable. The mission being planned was significantly more complex than the previous operation. Intelligence had identified a network of enemy commanders operating from multiple locations across a wide geographic area. The operation would require coordinated strikes against 3 separate targets, with precise timing and exceptional tactical coordination to prevent the escape of high-value individuals. Harrison was again serving as the overall mission commander, but his approach to including Sarah in the planning process was dramatically different from their previous interaction. Rather than relegating her to a passive observational role, he had specifically requested her participation as the primary sniper asset for the most challenging target in the operation. Ghost Angel will provide overwatch for Target Alpha, Harrison announced to the assembled special operations personnel. This target requires precision engagement at extended range with multiple potential complications. Lieutenant Mitchell has demonstrated the capabilities necessary for this mission profile. The briefing room contained representatives from SEAL teams, Delta Force operators, Army Rangers, and Air Force Special Operations personnel. These were among the most experienced and capable military professionals in the world, and their acceptance of Sarah as an equal participant represented validation at the highest levels of the special operations community. The target assigned to Sarah presented technical challenges that exceeded even her previous accomplishments. The engagement range would approach 1,200 meters, well beyond the distances typically considered practical for precision shooting. The target location was positioned in terrain that would require her to shoot across a valley with complex wind patterns and elevation changes that would affect bullet trajectory. Additionally, the timing of her shot would need to coordinate precisely with ground assault operations at the other 2 targets. The network of enemy commanders was known to communicate regularly, and eliminating all 3 simultaneously was essential to preventing warnings that could allow some targets to escape before the operations could be completed. Sarah studied the mission parameters with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized her previous preparation. The technical requirements pushed the boundaries of what was possible with current sniper weapons and optics, requiring calculations and preparations that left no margin for error. The approach to her firing position would require an insertion by helicopter followed by a 6-hour movement through mountainous terrain. The route would take her through areas of potential enemy activity, requiring stealth and tactical awareness throughout the approach march. Once in position, she would need to remain concealed for up to 12 hours while conducting surveillance and preparing for the coordinated engagement. Equipment selection for this mission required careful consideration of the extreme technical requirements. Sarah chose her most accurate rifle system paired with premium ammunition that had been individually tested for consistency. Her optics package included advanced range-finding equipment and atmospheric sensors that would provide real-time data on conditions affecting bullet flight. The weather forecast for the operation date showed variable wind conditions with the possibility of sudden changes that could affect shot placement. Sarah would need to monitor atmospheric conditions continuously and be prepared to make rapid adjustments based on changing environmental factors. As the mission date approached, Sarah found that her preparation routine had evolved to reflect her enhanced status within the special operations community. Instead of working in isolation as she had before her first successful mission, she now participated in comprehensive rehearsals with the entire operation team. Her input on tactical planning was sought and incorporated into the final operational procedures. Commander Harrison personally reviewed Sarah's mission preparation, demonstrating the level of attention that was now devoted to ensuring her success. Their planning sessions reflected mutual professional respect and shared commitment to operational excellence rather than the skepticism and dismissiveness that had characterized their initial interactions. "This shot will be the most technically challenging engagement of the entire operation," Harrison observed as they reviewed the target parameters. "Success depends on precision that very few people in the world can deliver under these conditions." Sarah appreciated the confidence Harrison expressed in her capabilities, but she also understood the pressure that accompanied such expectations. The mission's success would largely depend on her ability to deliver a perfect shot at the precisely coordinated moment, with no opportunity for correction or second attempts. The night before the operation, Sarah followed her established routine of equipment checks and mental preparation. However, she no longer felt the isolation and uncertainty that had characterized her preparation for the first mission. She was now fully integrated into the special operations community, with teammates who respected her skills and trusted her judgment. The insertion went smoothly, with Sarah reaching her designated landing zone and beginning the approach march toward her firing position. The terrain was even more challenging than anticipated, requiring careful navigation through rocky areas where a misstep could result in injury or equipment damage that would compromise the mission. During the 6-hour movement, Sarah encountered two situations that required tactical decision-making. The first involved avoiding a group of civilians who were unexpectedly present in an area that intelligence had indicated would be unoccupied. The second required changing her route when she observed signs of recent enemy activity along her planned path. Both situations tested Sarah's fieldcraft and tactical judgment, skills that had been developed through months of operations in Afghanistan but had not been fully evaluated during her previous missions. Her ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances while maintaining mission focus demonstrated the comprehensive capabilities that distinguished elite operators from ordinary soldiers. When Sarah finally reached her firing position, she found herself on a narrow ridge overlooking the target valley. The position provided excellent observation of the target building but required careful positioning to avoid detection by enemy forces in the area. The range to the target measured exactly 1,197 meters, confirming the extreme difficulty of the engagement requirements. Sarah established her position with meticulous attention to concealment and stability. The shot would require absolute precision, and every aspect of her setup needed to be perfect. She tested her equipment systems, confirmed her range calculations, and began the systematic observation of target area activity that would continue until the moment of engagement. Through her spotting scope, Sarah observed the target building and surrounding area for several hours, developing an understanding of activity patterns and identifying the specific location where the high-value target was most likely to appear. The building showed signs of significant security measures, with guards positioned at multiple locations and vehicles that could be used for rapid escape. As the time for coordinated engagement approached, Sarah received status reports from the other elements of the operation. The assault teams were moving toward their respective targets, and all elements reported readiness to execute the simultaneous strikes. The precision timing required for mission success depended on split-second coordination among units separated by many miles. Sarah's radio crackled with the final coordination message from Harrison. All elements were in position, and the coordinated engagement would begin in 30 seconds. Sarah's target had appeared at the designated location, and atmospheric conditions were within acceptable parameters for the extreme range engagement. The countdown proceeded with mechanical precision. At the designated moment, Sarah squeezed the trigger of her rifle, sending a precisely calculated projectile across the valley toward a target that appeared no larger than a pinpoint through her scope. The shot represented the culmination of years of training, months of combat experience, and weeks of specific preparation for this particular engagement. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet's trajectory across the valley, a flight that would take nearly 2 seconds to complete at the extreme range involved. During those seconds, the success or failure of a complex multi-unit operation hung in the balance, dependent on calculations and execution that pushed the boundaries of what was humanly possible. The bullet struck precisely as calculated, eliminating the target at the exact moment that the other elements of the operation engaged their respective objectives. The coordination was flawless, and, within minutes, confirmation arrived that all 3 targets had been successfully neutralized simultaneously. Harrison's voice came over the radio with obvious emotion. "Ghost Angel, outstanding shot. Mission successful. All elements report objectives accomplished." The successful completion of this operation established Sarah's reputation as one of the premier precision shooters in the special operations community. The technical difficulty of the 1100-meter shot, combined with the split-second timing requirements, created a standard of excellence that few could match. As Sarah began her extraction from the firing position, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from skepticism to respect within the special operations community. The transformation had required not just technical skill, but also mental resilience, adaptability, and unwavering commitment to excellence under the most demanding circumstances. During the helicopter flight back to base, Sarah realized that she had achieved something beyond personal recognition. Her success had opened doors for other women who might follow similar paths within special operations forces. She had demonstrated that excellence in military service was determined by capability and dedication rather than any other factors. The debriefing for this mission was conducted at a higher classification level, reflecting the strategic importance of the targets that had been eliminated. Sarah's contribution was recognized not just as technically exceptional, but as strategically significant to broader operations in the region. In the weeks that followed, requests for Sarah's participation in other high-priority missions arrived regularly. Her reputation had spread throughout the international special operations community, and she found herself working with units from allied nations who sought the precision capabilities she could provide. Commander Harrison, who had evolved from skeptic to advocate, summarized the transformation best during one of their operational planning sessions. "When I first heard the call sign Ghost Angel, I thought it was a joke. Now I understand that it represents something much more significant. It represents precision, reliability, and excellence that can be counted on when everything else is falling apart." Sarah's story became part of the oral tradition within Special Operations Forces, passed along through training programs and informal conversations among operators around the world. The tale of the SEAL commander who laughed at her call sign and was subsequently amazed by her performance illustrated broader lessons about assumptions, capabilities, and the importance of evaluating people based on their actions rather than preconceptions. Years later, as Sarah continued her military career and eventually moved into training and leadership roles, she would reflect on those crucial missions in Afghanistan as the foundation of everything that followed. The skill she demonstrated and the respect she earned during those operations opened opportunities that shaped the rest of her professional life. The call sign Ghost Angel became synonymous with precision shooting excellence throughout the military community. Future generations of snipers would study Sarah's techniques and strive to achieve the standards she had established under combat conditions. Her legacy extended beyond personal achievement to influence training programs and operational procedures that would benefit countless other military professionals. The story that began with skepticism and dismissive laughter concluded with profound respect and lasting influence. Sarah had proven that dedication, training, and skill were the true measures of value in military service, regardless of any other factors that might create initial doubt. Her journey from outsider to legend illustrated the transformative power of excellence under pressure and the universal truth that actions speak louder than words in determining a person's worth.